So I'm in the home dashboard of SLM. You can see dashboard. This is the first thing you'll see whenever you log in. And the way I have my dashboard customized is in the first table here, you will be able to see your overdue tests. So since we're managing proof tests, the first thing I log in, I see I can either narrow it down to a specific site. Let's say I'm working the Beverly Hills refinery today, and I want to see for a specific unit what are the overdue tests. I can see those first two tests here that are overdue. One's overdue by 1 day, one's overdue by 64 days. So I'm going to look at this one right here. It's a full functional test, and all I need to do is click on it. And it'll bring me to the Operate Maintain module. I didn't lose my spot here on the home dashboard. It opened up a new tab where I can see the Operate Maintain and this specific test group. With this information, I can see the test name, the description, the test interval, the duration. It was calculated from SIL verification, and it's overdue by two days because the last test date was May 3rd, 2018, which makes the next test date May 3rd, which is automatically populated. I can't edit that. And it also overdue. So down below I can see it's a SIF, and I can also see those SIF's inputs. You got DP transmitters here, and I can see the output device is a ball assembly, and then I can see the logic solver device. So all of these are on the same test interval of 2 years. No previous test events have been created, no deferrals, and no attached test procedures or other documents here. So what I can do is, let's say that I want to go ahead and defer this test, but I don't currently know how far I can defer it while still meeting my target SIL. So what I'll do is I'll click on the SIF, and I can see it's a SIL 2 with an RRF of 130 as the target with a PFD average. If I want to view this information in the instrumented systems, I just need to click this View Instrumented Systems Data, which will take me to the actual visual representation of this information for this SIF. I can see that it's a 2 out of 3 and a 2 out of 2 output. All the information here, and then I can go to my SIL Calc summary, which will show me the actual information around the SIL Calc and what it currently is. So I can see down here that with these 3 different failure rate sources that I'm currently meeting, the only one I'm meeting that 130 target is with the custom failure rate. So that's the failure rate that I'm using. I did not meet it with my design basis failure rate or the external failure rate source. So what I can do is I'm going to go over to the I/O sensitivity graph here. And it's just another tab at the SIF level where I can then see if I were to adjust my proof test interval. So we said that was a 2-year test interval, so I'll leave it at that. And let's say I want to see it's stepped out every 6 months, so I'll just do 0.5. And we said we're using our custom failure rate, so I'll leave that as custom. 2 years output step, I want to see every 6 months, and then same thing, we're using the custom failure rate for the output and the logic solver. So then I'll go ahead and generate this graph, which will show me how far out I can defer this test while still be meeting my test interval. So if I just scroll down here, I can see that this dotted line here is my target, which is the 130 target RRF. And on the on the x-axis here, we can see what the output test interval can go out to, and each of these different lines are different input test intervals. So I can see that around here is when we dip below the 130 target. So at an input of 3.5 years, I drop to 129 if it is a 6-year output test interval. I can also see that down here. If I just scroll below, I can see the green shows each of the input test interval and output test intervals that I will be meeting my target of that 130. I can see here that the furthest I can go is a 6-year output test interval and a 3-year input test interval to get that 130, and it'll be right at the 130. So if you want to have a little bit of a buffer, let's say 10%, you might need to extend that out. So 10% would be 13, so about a 143. If we want to look at the 143 range, I can either have right here at a 5-year output test interval and keep it as a 2-year test interval, so I wouldn't be able to extend my test interval there. However, we can see that we can extend our input test interval all the way out to 6.5 years if we move our output test interval out to 4.5, which means we can extend it another 2.5 years and still be meeting our target RRF of 130 with a 10% buffer there. So I'm going to go ahead and submit a deferral event. I'm just going to go back to my test group, and the currently is 2 years. So if I'm extending it to 4.5, that gives me an extra 2.5 years that I can defer. So all I'm going to do is click this defer test and defer test based on SIL Calculations. Now, before I get into this, maybe I also want to view the associated tests that maybe these devices might be a part of. So what I'm just going to do is check real quick. I'm going to click this input device here, and I'm going to see if it's related to any other tests. So currently, no, this is the only functional test that this device is a part of. It's been commissioned since 2014, so no failures and no test events prior. Same thing for the output device. Let's go ahead and check that. Nope, this is the only test interval or test group related to this output. So we're good there with deferring. And then let's look at the logic solver and see if that's part of any other tests as well. And nope, that's the only test. So we're good to go. We can go ahead and defer this test. I'll go back to the test group here and just click on defer test. And then I'm going to go SIL Calc validation to defer tests 2.5 years. We can see the last test date, the original test date. Now how far we're going to push it out. I'm going to say, let's see, 2.5 years. And reason, need to defer, whatever that reason might be, any safety impact, maintenance turnaround impact, operational impact, or other deferral notes. Let me do this. Let me do 30 months instead. Looks like it won't let me do a decimal. So that extends it out to 11, so November 3rd of 2022 is when this next test date will be. Which function? I'm going to say the function that's part of the test, and then it'll ask me which devices do I want to defer, and I'll just go ahead and click all devices. So I have my deferral authorization here. I can view the deferred devices and functions. Here's the SIF that's going to be deferred, and here's the deferred devices. And then from there, I'm going to go ahead and submit it for approval. So since I am an approving authority, I can go ahead and approve it myself. If I was not, then this would be grayed out, similar to these other buttons, and I would have to pick whoever the approving authority is, submit that for approval. But I'll go ahead and self-approve myself. And there we go. So the test has been deferred. If we actually go back to this related test, let me just go to the test worksheet, Here's the test group link right here. So I can see now that if I go, I can see that the next test date has changed to November 3rd, 2022. And I can see the deferred test here, SIL Calc validation. Now if I go back to my home screen and I just update the screen here, I can see that that test is no longer overdue. If I go back to my Beverly Hills and generate the report, I can see now that that test is now gone from the report. So let's go ahead and now track an actual test that has been done. So I'm going to go to this test right here. That's 64 days overdue. It's an unplanned shutdown gas stabilization unit opportunity for test. And this time I can see, 5-year test interval. It's an SRS requirement. It was due March 1st. So it's overdue. And this one has multiple functions. We have a BPCS, some CIFs, some alarm that are all part of this test. And then we can see our inputs. It's a device, some DP transmitters. See our output devices, and it looks like no logic solvers. If we want to add test procedures, you can actually add the physical test procedure, whether it's a PDF or Word document, or we can add a link to where that test procedure might be by just adding the external link if it's in some kind of other document management system. Or what we can also do is take from a procedure that might have already been added. So if we have an offline test procedure here, we're going to go ahead and add it. So now anybody that comes to this test will see this test procedure that they can then download the actual procedure or go to the link if there's a link that's provided as well. So they would take the procedure, they would go and do the testing, and then come back, and now they want to track the results of that test. They would, instead of clicking the deferred test as we did before, we'll go ahead and do record test event. So similar, a very easy workflow. I'll expand this window. We can put in the as found and as left. So if it's, let's say the test passed, but we found some failures, so we want to identify those devices that failed, but it didn't actually fail the entire test, I'll do fail-safe failure. Or if the test completely failed, I'll do a failed dangerous. So let's say we left it as a pass. The test was today. Complete. Any notes or any work order. If you do have this tied to your CMMS, such as SAP or Maximo, this information would automatically come in when this test event is created from the work order that's generated. So from here, I'm going to say, let's say all of the functions were tested. And we'll say all of these devices were tested as well. And then from there, we can say, okay, well, which, you said there was identified failure. So where is that failure? I'm going to say, let's say this CIF right here was the fail. And we found a fail-safe failure. We left it as a pass. Today, fail-safe failure was, let's say, a parameter deviation, whatever it might be, and then you can also do, say it's a hardware fault, and then safety critical. Any failure description or mitigation actions can be added there as well. And then for the specific devices, let's say this device was the device that failed. And similar, we can go down to the device level and identify, that there was a fail with a fail-safe failure. We left it as a pass. Today, the fail was a failed to close on demand, and it was a device failure, safety critical, and device failed, and we repaired the device, and the work order here, and any maintenance notes. So I'll go ahead and click save. So now we're at the actual test event. I can see all the information we just filled in through that workflow. I can also see event follow-up information, which I'll get to a little bit later. We have a functional test results, so this is on the functions. So I had identified the one function that failed. However, for all the other functions that I did not select, it automatically gave it a pass. So I didn't have to go through each one and identify pass. I only had to identify the one that had failed. And similar for the devices, for all of the devices that were not giving a fail, we're given a pass. And the only device that has a fail has all the information that we filled out in that workflow. So from there, we can go ahead and get approval. So similar, I can either submit for approval or I can self-approve, and I'll go ahead and self-approve. And at any time you can remove approval, and the reason why you might want to do that is because now this test event is locked. I can't make any edits. The only area that I can edit is down here, which is the follow-up analysis. So if you wanted to approve the event, which then changes the next test date on that report. So if I just run this report again, that test is now gone because the next test date has updated to the 5 years from today. And I can come in and follow up and say, yes, we completed some analysis. It was done today. What the reference was. Any follow-up notes. And then I can also attach, the actual notes too. So if I wanted to add maybe some analysis or some kind of information around the repair, I can go ahead and click repair, create document, test analysis, or let's say failure analysis. Reference, whatever it might be. And then I can attach the actual failure analysis here. So anybody that comes to reference this test event later on can see that reference document. And you can actually download it and view it however you want. So just an example, we have a failure analysis here. So that is how we can manage proof test in SLM and tie it back to the SIL calculation to see what the results of deferring a test or being able to view all of the information around devices after a test has been completed. Thank you.